between 83 now, we are in December 2019, and something called Corona showed up, right? And just as a quick reminder, COVID-19, the name comes from CO because it's Corona, VI because it's a virus, D because it's a disease, and 19 is the year. And COVID-19, we call COVID-19 virtually everything. Actually, it's the name of the disease. Why? Because the name of the virus is very complicated, SARS-CoV-2. It's pretty complicated. But there is also a reason why it's named like this, SARS, Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. And remember that this vaccine actually was named by the WHO back in February 22nd in 2020. Remember this date because it will come back. But coronavirus is very well known. Actually, 4 of them are the source of what we call our common cold, when we have sneezing and, common cold, 4 of them. Unfortunately, 3 of them are pretty nasty. One is SARS-CoV-1, right, which emerged in 2002, 2004, and infected about 8,000 people. Then people from the Middle East, we know that we had MERS. Now, SARS is the bad guy. SARS-CoV-2 was, and will continue to be, unfortunately, for a while, the bad guy. 120 million people infected and over 7 million deaths as of yesterday, okay? And if I were to take our 2 countries, unfortunately, we are in the lead. The US is number 1, Brazil is number 2, for all the bad reasons. These are not good positions to be in, with about 30 million people infected in the US, 500,000 people died, and in Brazil, about 12 million infected and 314,000 deaths as of by WHO yesterday, March 29. So this is not something to be particularly proud of, to be in position 1 and position 2. The good news in all this is COVID-19 has approved virus. It's the only coronavirus that has an approved vaccine. So let me walk you through the vaccine history, and I will give you a brief overview of what's available out there, and then I will zoom in on Moderna. So there are currently 4 types of vaccine. We'll talk today about the Moderna vaccine, which is very similar to the Pfizer BioNTech. And this is the messenger RNA vaccine. And basically what it does, I'll show you in a picture in a moment, it actually teaches the cell how to produce the antibodies. It teaches the cell to produce the antigen and teaches the body to react and produces the antibody. You might have heard about J&J, AstraZeneca, Oxford, and Sputnik, the Russian. These are different because they put the genetic elements in a virus, and it is engineered to carry the coronavirus genes. The third type of vaccine is the protein-based, and this is so the vaccine contains the coronavirus proteins, but not the genetic material. And last but certainly not least, this is the old way of manufacturing vaccine, where we take the virus, we weaken it, and then we inject it. So these are the 4 types, and most every company actually gets into 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now, it so very well happened, and this is where innovation is absolutely amazing, is, believe it or not, the mRNA vaccine were number 1, and yet it is the most advanced technology. So this is kind of the power of innovation. And with the power of innovation, I'd like to switch and talk about this guy, okay? You might or might not know him. His name is Nubar Afeyan. Nubar Afeyan is the founder and chairman of Moderna. And guess what? He was born in Lebanon, as I was, as some of you were born in Lebanon. He was born in Lebanon back in 1962. And from there, he went to Canada, did McGill, and then came back to the US in Boston, did a PhD in biochemical engineering at MIT. Now, this is the genius of our Lebanese DNA. Nubar founded his first company He was 24 years old, so before even finishing his PhD, and he has founded over 50 startups since then, 50, which is pretty amazing. And he's a super nice guy, which makes it even better. Remember I said about a minute ago about helpers? He's one of them for me. Why? Because our path intersected towards the end of 2019, where they were looking, Moderna was looking for someone with my profile to serve on their board. Little we knew back then that it will be COVID. So when I spent a few hours with Nubar, I was very impressed by him, and I felt really that we can work together. So he was my helper along the way, and guess what? Luck had it that I joined the board of Moderna just literally weeks before COVID erupted, and I had the infinite privilege and honor and passion and to be front and center in developing the vaccine. Now, unfortunately, despite the genius he is, Nubar was never granted the Lebanese citizenship. And the reason is his mother was Lebanese and his father was not, okay? Unfortunately, as of today, the situation is the same. And I have my daughter on the phone here with us. She wanted to see how that presents. And we have a son and a daughter. Our son has a son, our daughter has 2 kids. That's kind of the anomaly of our system, where his son can get the Lebanese citizenship. Unfortunately, my daughter, her kids cannot. Why? Because she's married an American, okay? So I don't know, maybe one day we can change this, because it's so unfair to the woman, to the Lebanese woman, and it's unfair to our country. So something to think about. This being said, with Moderna, this is how it works. So Nubar found this technology at Harvard and MIT, put together a small group, and frankly asked another immigrant to lead Moderna. And the name of the other immigrant is Stephane Barcell, coming from France, immigrated to the US. So when you think of it, Moderna was founded by an immigrant and was led by another immigrant. Yeah. And this is what immigration can do. So think about this process of mRNA as DNA being the storage. This is where the knowledge of our body is stored. The mRNA, messenger RNA, is the software. And the storage gives the instruction goes with the mRNA, and the mRNA actually, through a certain process, helps or triggers the manufacturing of protein, okay? And in the specific situation of corona, of the virus, it teaches the body to have the spike, this S spike that you see on this picture. And it teaches the body that whenever you see the spike, you generate antibodies. This is how it works. The beauty of this technology is most everything in our body functions through proteins. It is really everything, most everything in our body is protein-based. The minute you master this mRNA messenger, you can teach the body to actually manufacture literally any protein. So for a company like Moderna, frankly, the sky is the limit as to the applications in terms of vaccines, in terms of therapies, in terms of anything that you can think about. Now, let's zoom in for a minute here about how vaccines are developed. I will just look at the bottom of the page. It takes a long time, okay? So with the discovery, when it starts, and between discovery and when it gets to human, it could take between 3 and 8 years, right? And then when it gets to human, you start with what we call a phase 1. A phase 1 is you test the product or the vaccine in healthy volunteers, and you look for safety. You make sure that they are doing okay. If they're doing okay, then you switch to phase 2. And phase 2, you determine if the product is safe, but also you start determining which dose is the dose that we will need. And so you try multiple doses so that when you get to phase 3, which is multi-thousand people, you test the efficacy, you test the safety, and it is what is needed to register any product, including the vaccines. So all these products takes years, and in my experience, having been associated with multiple vaccines over the years, it can take from a minimum of 5, 6, 7 years to a maximum of forever. And the forever is, you know, when I joined the Pasteur Institute back in '83, it was the big hype around HIV, okay, HIV/AIDS. And back then, the Pasteur Institute, despite its resources, said, we will have a vaccine in 5 years. This was back in '83. Now we are in 2021, and if you read anything about the HIV vaccine, it continues to say that we will have a vaccine in 5 years, right? And it has been, what, 25, 30 years since then? So developing a vaccine is not trivial, and it takes time. And this is the genius of a technology like Moderna. So look at this. I'd like to take you now a little bit behind the scene and show you a few things. On January 11 of 2020, the virus sequence was shared to the world by China, okay? So this is January 11th. If I recall correctly, I remember, I think it was a Friday. So Moderna got the vaccine, the virus sequence on January 11th. 2 days later, over the weekend, 2 days later, the scientists at Moderna had finalized the sequence of the vaccine. 2 days later, what usually could take months and years because of the technology and the innovation driven by immigrants, right? The scientists were able to have the sequence in 2 days. January 13, the sequence is done. And if you count, 3 weeks later, we had the vaccine in vials, 3 weeks later. And then another 2 weeks, we shipped our vaccine to the US National Institute of Health to run a phase 1 to try and see if this vaccine is safe in humans. So if you do the math, it took 63 days from the virus sequence to the first human dosing, 63 days. What you look on the slide, what you're seeing on the slide is the first in the history of humanity. It never happened before, ever, okay? And this is what makes my role, makes the role of my colleagues at Moderna absolutely an amazing journey, because I joined Moderna just before that. And on February 7 or around, we decided to create a COVID committee that would oversee everything, all the activities of the company related to COVID. I had the pleasure and the honor of being one of 3 people on this committee with Nubar Afeyan and another colleagues. So since then, we were really continued to be really front and center in the development of the vaccine. Remember the date of February 22nd, where WHO named the virus? Remember that? And if you look at the dates, the virus was named about 2 weeks after, not before, 2 weeks after the vaccine was in vials, okay? This is unheard of, and the rest is history. So in May, the first subject was dosed, and in July, we initiated our phase 3 with 30,000 subjects, and in October, we completed the enrollment. One more time, I will take you behind the scene and tell you something that you probably did not actually, I'm sure you did not read in the media. The biggest challenge that the team of 3 that we were and the management were faced with was, which dose do we pick? And let me walk you through the rationale here. In phase 2, we tried 50 microgram, 25 microgram, 50 microgram, 100 microgram, okay? And microgram is the dose, right? It appeared that 50 microgram and 100 microgram worked more or less the same. Now, if you think of a capacity that is limited, and you go with a 50 microgram, you can make twice as much doses as 100 microgram. And therefore, you can vaccinate twice as many people, right? At the same time, if the 50 microgram doesn't work well enough, then you have embarked humanity, literally humanity, on a path with a vaccine that doesn't work very, very well or well enough. And this took a lot of thinking because on one hand, we wanted to make sure that the company and its production could help as many people as possible in the world. At the same time, we had to make sure that the vaccine that we will develop will work to the best extent. And decision was made to do two things. We went with 100 microgram and we invested a huge amount of money to build another manufacturing plant. And we decided to do it in Switzerland. Manufacturing plant number 1 is in Boston in the US, so that we can supply the world. So the decision of 100 microgram was a decision that was purely driven by what is best for the patient, not what is best for the company, because it required us to invest a lot of money and a lot of effort in creating another manufacturing plant. The story of COVID and the development of the vaccine was a series of critical decisions for a small company like Moderna that had to be taken day after day, week after week, because Moderna was a small company, continues to be a small company. We are not Pfizer, we are not J&J, we are not any of these big companies. We had about 500 people, never launched a product in ever. We developed, we're, small company in Boston. All of a sudden, we are front and center worldwide, working very hard every day, 24/7 a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with the team to make sure that we have a vaccine available and every day counts. One of the things that was obsessive for us is the fact that every time, every day, I looked at the TV and they said 10,000 more deaths, 20,000 more deaths, 15,000 more deaths. And it was such a pressure on us at Moderna because every day counted, every single day. And, it becomes really obsessive to understand that even if you shave one day out of this process, you can potentially save 10,000 lives. I mean, it's huge. Fortunately, it worked out beautifully well. We have about 30,000 volunteers that accepted to be in our study. Half of them were vaccine, half of them were placebo. And we were gratified by the fact that the vaccine, as you might have heard it, had a 94.1 efficacy at preventing COVID illness, including the severe diseases. And just to show you on a graph so this graph shows the placebo, the number of individuals who get COVID, and you see the placebo, the number continues to go up, whereas after 2 doses of vaccine, the number of individuals who get COVID is flat, completely flat. And what is more important, or as important, in the vaccine in the blue group, we did not have any deaths, okay, any severe. And that's something that we're very proud of. And our 100 microgram paid off because the serious adverse events were rare, and we had more or less the same type of adverse events, reactions between placebo, which is just normal saline that we inject, and the vaccine itself. And what played in our favor is the fact that the vaccine is stable for 2 years at -20 Celsius, but it could be kept up to 3 months actually in the fridge, any refrigerator. So from a distribution perspective, this made a gigantic difference. Now that we have the vaccine and we know that it works, we have to go to the regulatory agencies like FDA and have it blessed by them, approved by the FDA. And it's an interesting challenge. Why? Because in normal times, having anything approved by FDA or any regulatory agency takes time, all right? So it takes about 10 months, and the priority review, so if it's really, really urgent, it takes nevertheless 6 months. And you very well imagine that we could not wait 6 months, okay? 6 months equal 180 days, and 180 days with 10,000 or 20,000 deaths per day, that was totally unacceptable. Fortunately, there was a way to do it. And the way to do it was driven by our Minister of Health, his name is Alex Azar, or Alex Azar in our Lebanese way, who happened to be from Lebanese origin, another Lebanese who helped with the COVID crisis. And basically, Dr. Azar determined that there was a public threat to the US. The public threat made it such that the regulatory authorities in the US would grant an approval for this product if the product is determined to reasonably believe, it will be reasonable to believe that the drug may be effective to prevent, diagnose, or treat a life-threatening condition. So with our results, it was clear that we passed, if you will, this level of scrutiny. And we were able to get the product, the vaccine, approved. So we submitted the emergency use authorization on December 1. On December 18, 17 days later, the emergency use authorization was approved, and we shipped the first vaccines to the US on December 20. So if you think about what happened in less than 1 year between the sequence of the virus and the vaccine available for public use, less than 1 year, okay? Now, if you think of it, it was a year too much, a year too long, but in the history of humanity, this was the record. Nowhere, no one ever was able to go that fast in putting a vaccine, a safe vaccine out there. And the safety was proven because now we have millions and millions and millions of people who receive the vaccine and are doing very, very well. So my second thought here, my lesson learned, is if you look at the history of Moderna, it really shapes, you know, what we call our immigration mindset. This whole adventure started with nothing. I mean, the company did not have the means. Fortunately, we were helped by the US government, who gave us $1 billion to manufacture the vaccine. But without this immigration mindset of people involved who wanted to make something from nothing, we would not have succeeded. Now, these opportunities are never easy or obvious. I had sleepless nights many times thinking whether or not what we were doing made sense, whether we were on the right track or not, whether it will result in something or not. So any of these decisions will take courage, it'll take resilience, but also it takes faith in oneself. And this is the core of what we are as immigrants, frankly. It's a representation of what we have done, what we can do, and what we will continue to do, right? And this is a message from Nubar. Nubar is an immigrant. And he said, when you leave the comfort of what you know expose yourself to criticism, but persist, persist, persist until you make it habitable, palatable. This is what an immigrant does. So he was inviting people to think of the immigrant mindset. And it's the kind of resilience, the adaptivity, all the things that we think are rarefied skills in an entrepreneur, that's every immigrant has to go through. And if you take a minute to think for yourselves or your parents or your grandparents who came to Brazil with nothing or not much, they persisted, persisted, persisted. I'm sure they were, you were, we were criticized, saying, what the heck do you know? And, but at the same time, as immigrants, as proud Lebanese, we have the resilience, we know how to adapt, we know how to make lemonade from lemon multiple times, and this is what we do best. It is in our DNA. Sadly, though, we're not done. The COVID battle is still ongoing. If the Brazilian government is interested in getting the Moderna vaccine, pick up the phone and call Moderna. The minute you start knowing and mastering manufacturing proteins, the sky is the limit. The future is here and we can do it.